Hello and welcome to week 5 of the eGrad School Project Management module. This is the last week of the module and in fact the last video that Harm and I will be producing for you. Unfortunately, we've enjoyed it. So I'm Murray Lane and
I'm Harm Hollander.
Okay, didn't even need me to introduce you. Thank you, Harm. We've got this down pat. So this week 5, we concentrated on the execution of projects, monitoring, reviewing, refining projects, and had a good discussion about how as a researcher, how your project could be reviewed and improved. There's also a second discussion we won't really cover today on software. We put that one in because we feel that we might not have as much expertise on the software that's out there, given that it changes all the time, and as you, the researchers. So we put that one in there so you can share some of your great ideas. And I saw that there was just a huge range of experience and suggestions for different types of software. So thank you very much for putting that in. Moving on to the topic for this week, Harm. And I thought I might use this wrap video as a bit of an overview as well of what we've covered. And I'd like to start off with going back to the very start and thinking about what project management actually means. And I'd like to frame this as a question to you in the context of something that you said in the discussion to Paducah. You said that because research is the process of going up alleys to see if they're blind, this is a good description of research attributed to Marston Bates, you say, there'll always be surprises to deal with. You revised your scope according to the circumstances. Project management is, of course, only a framework to help navigate this process. So, Harm, is that in the context of what we've learned over the last five weeks, that I love that description of what research is. And also you've kind of started to also redefine what project management is, all in the one post. Would you like to review what project management is to you?
Yeah. Well, I've come to realize after a little while that you can't predict everything on a project, and that's what makes it exciting. It makes research exciting, makes my work on real design projects exciting. You can't predict everything. You can only put in a framework to predict as much risk and as much of the management strategy as possible. So I regard project management as a structure that taps you on the shoulder once in a while, either through the process itself or through the wisdom that is given by the manager, just tapping you and putting you in the right direction at the critical design or critical decisions. I compare it, I've got an analogy, a personal one, that when I take the dog for a walk, the dog thinks he's leading, but really just a little tug on the leash once in a while guides him, and then the dog thinks he's leading again. So that's it about project management, just a little tug, and it automatically goes into the right direction.
And so is this also about a kind of a management style? I mean, it sounds like a good way to manage, in that that approach doesn't sound very top down. It sounds like you're guiding without micromanaging. You're not micromanaging the dog, you know.
Oh, yeah. One of the other things that came up in discussion is there was a mention of changing supervisors, at which point I said, all right, well, what I found in my research was very important for me to choose the supervisor rather than be chosen by a supervisor. So to the point of interviewing the supervisor for the position. So I think that's all part of project management, to be in control, to drive the project, and to ultimately determine the success of it.
So to be proactive and yet know when to step forward or when to gently nudge others.
Yeah. Well, interesting, because I posed this question to a project manager, a professional project manager, who I really respect. And she answered the question much in the same way, saying, project management is about steering. Yeah, good, yeah, I like that. But then we went on to talk about, in the building industry, a lot of project managers are in the reactive position. All they do is react to circumstances, which is not really good project management, in my opinion. Sure, there are circumstances where you have to react, but by and large, you want to be proactive with it.
Yeah. So look, just looking at the discussion more broadly this week, could you see much value? Because it looked like there were some great responses and people had looked, you know,
Yeah,
been prompted to review what they've done.
I was really impressed this week in that they were great questions to pose to start with. But when people reacted, they sort of wrapped up their statements as if it was a self-reflection, as if it was a story they were telling towards themselves. And I could just feel the sense of it being beneficial just to articulate that in such a simple way. I don't know. I'll throw that open.
Yeah. I got another question based on your comment about the about what research is. You know, is the process of going up alleys to see if they're blind. In relation to another concept that was covered this week in scope creep, given the nature of research being so open-ended, do you think it's more likely that there will be scope creep in research than in the construction industry, in buildings?
I think they're different. It's certainly different, but scope creep is very possible in both scenarios. In research, you've got the luxury of revising the scope downwards. In my world,
having less to do.
Well, less to do, but make it more focused. So some of the people responded by saying, by doing that, by challenging the scope, I could also make it sharper. So overall, it was beneficial. My only comment to that was, yes, you can reduce scope, but don't do it at the price of your overview about the subject, or, you know, having a pertinent knowledge about an overall subject. That's my only advice.
Is it, I mean, scope creep in the construction industry is more of a hassle, though, isn't it? Like, given that is it more restrained in your experience by budgetary requirements than in research? You know, is that why? What's the difference? Why is it more possible to revise scope down in research?
Well, in construction, you're given a brief for a specific sort of animal, you know, 5,000 square meter building. So you're more or less committed to the 5,000 square meters, unless you can think of a brilliant plan to make economies, make double ups and so on. So it's fairly difficult to reduce scope overall on a building project.
Because it isn't such an open-ended question to start with. It's a finite question. You must produce a 5,000 square building that does these things. Where in research, it's a little bit more like, I wonder what we're going to find if we look down this alley.
Yeah. It's certainly an advantage in research, and it allows you to focus on the quality and even the time if you're blocked with the time.
Maybe the smaller the project, particularly in research, the easier it is to adjust the scope as well, particularly in the context of an HDR student working on their own project, compared to a large research project. You know, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking to Doug Baker about these, you know, large multi-million-dollar research projects. When there's a lot of money and then you know, a lot of resources committed, I imagine it's more difficult to turn that beast around.
Yeah, certainly agree. Yeah.
Picking up on another topic based on the discussion, that of iteration. you've been responding to Manuela and Selena and saying, your story reminds me of a rule I've set for myself. That is, every iteration needs to bring greater value. Would you like to expand on that? Like, do you actively, is iteration for you something that is just ongoing all the time and you're looking for opportunities to do so? Or is it an end of processing?
Oh no, it's an ongoing process. So I'm in the world of design. When I set out to do my original design, I try to do the best I can to the criteria that have been defined. That doesn't mean to say it can't be improved. So if the client challenges it and asks certain questions about it, little windows of opportunity can emerge. So my rule to myself is, I don't go away and grumble about it. I go away and seek the opportunity of the new challenges in it and come up with a better product. That's the spirit of it. But in this context, it was said, oh, right, you've got to adjust something. You've got to adjust scope, time, or budget somehow. So in reweighing that, do it in a way that it's a win-win situation for everyone. That you end up with a better product, that you sleep better at night.
Yeah. And ultimately, to bring in one last topic, ultimately you're trying to avoid project failure. Now, I can imagine that, like, what is project, to start with, what does project failure look like in construction?
Not managing properly. Not managing properly, and it becomes a beast at large. Just becomes a wild animal rather than a controlled, rigored piece of work. And
assuming then that what is delivered was not what was hoped for.
What is delivered is junk and doesn't necessarily fulfill its purpose. Okay,
so then let's apply that concept to research projects. What does is it possible to have a failure in research, given that?
Well, yeah, right. It depends on the context, doesn't it? So you can't have a failed experiment because the purpose of that experiment was to find out what happens.
Yeah.
So you can't have a failure in that sense. You can have a failure in not pursuing it with rigor, or not pursuing it to a conclusion.
You can have a failed process.
Yes.
Yeah. And which I suppose is exactly the same as in construction. When you described what a project failure looks like in construction, that it seemed to be that you were talking about the process largely. So
yeah. Some of my most embarrassing projects I like to forget. It's just the way it is.
Okay. Well, then it kind of draws us to a close there, Harm. Any last comments?
I've really enjoyed this, and I've really been reflecting on what project management is, because this is my first round with this course. So it's been beneficial all around.
Well, I must say it's been great having you along. It's made it so much easier for me, and it's been great having you in these discussions because, apart from one interview that I, this time we did with Doug, in the past it's just been me talking to a screen. So it's much easier to flesh out the issues in discussion rather than in monologue. So thank you so much for coming along.
Well, thank you.
And thank you all for participating in this module. There are a suite of other eGrad School modules that you can join, and I'm sure Alexandra, who coordinates the eGrad School, will be more than happy to share some of those other modules with you. I'm involved in presenting your research one coming up soon, so I encourage you to do that one if you're doing presentations for your research. Otherwise, all the best with your research and with your project management.
Yes, all the best. It really sounds exciting. Thanks.